Craig Lazar, followed by Fanwy Flynn.
Fellow members of the Planning Board. My name is Craig Lazar, and I'm a graduate student working towards a Master of Professional Studies degree in the Environmental Studies Department here at ESF. I earned my Bachelor of Science degree here at ESF in 2008. In April of 2008, I was awarded the title of Renewable Energy Scholar by a national campaign called the Presidential Forum on Renewable Energy. As a child growing up in central New York, I suffered from asthma, and I know of the hardships and worry that living with asthma imposes on families. Empirical evidence shows that a strong correlation between fossil fuel emissions from electrical power plants and asthma and other respiratory ailments, especially for the young and old. The draft energy plan acknowledges these health impacts and even highlights the magnified impact that air quality has for residents of New York City, yet the draft energy plan dedicates New York State to the same old dirty energy technologies. We have power sources available to us right now that don't burden the public and government with compound chronic health care costs associated with breathing air containing fossil fuel power plant emissions. Healthcare costs associated with fossil fuels are a burden to the public and are a free implicit subsidy to the fossil fuel business. There is no regulatory structure to address this tragedy of the commons, and we all suffer for it with every breath. Not only do we desperately need steep investments in renewable, low-carbon energy, but we need to stop allowing fossil fuel companies to socialize the negative impacts of their business model. We need to end actual, legal, and clearly unnecessary subsidies to the most profitable corporations to ever exist on Earth. Part of that struggle is going to include an investment and development package for renewable energy that matches the preferential treatment that has historically gone to fossil fuel projects. This will begin to introduce competition into the energy marketplace, competition which has been absent for far too long, harming the health and development not only of New York, but of the nation. New York has not only the capability, but a responsibility to lead the nation towards renewable energy. Over 60% of our electricity already comes from low-carbon sources. For New York, carbon neutrality or even net carbon capture is low-hanging fruit. 80% reduction target by 2050 is an embarrassingly inadequate goal. I'll be 65 and hopefully retired by then. I think it's safe to say that the members of the Planning Board, with maybe one or two exceptions, are unlikely to see ever the fruits of such a plan. By 2050, it will be too late to do anything at all about climate catastrophe. As the home of one of the world's most important global cities, New York State has a lower opportunity cost and a higher profile for developing and demonstrating the benefits of renewable low-carbon energy. The prosperity of every New Yorker is harmed by this failure to jump at the opportunity for immediate and deep investments in wind and biomass power over the next decade. We need to be far more proactive than this to even begin to address any of the problems that are mentioned in the very last pages of the plan under the heading Impacts and Considerations. This last section of the plan is almost entirely self-referential, is an almost entirely self-referential indictment of everything that comes before it. I have several professors that would no doubt fail me for presenting such a self-contradictory product as a class project, and they'd be right to do so. Most dismaying is that the Energy Planning Board has underutilized the resources available within New York State in drafting this plan, and that is a shame. Just in central New York, we have the nation's oldest environmental science university, ESF, the new Golisano Institute for Sustainability at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and Cornell University and the Cornell Cooperative Extension, just to name a few. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to point to any other state in the Union and find such a unique and robust collection of environmental scientists and wisdom as New York State has. And it's a shame that this expertise is not explicitly celebrated and utilized in our 2014 energy plan. New York has the technical and policy development expertise within its own borders to lead the nation from carbon-intensive and increasingly destructive fossil fuel power. Right here at ESF, there are pioneering and innovative solutions to harnessing energy from woody biomass. It is known colloquially as the Woody Biomass Program, which concentrates on cultivation of shrub willow due to its incredible ability to filter wastes on marginal soils, while maximizing harvestable biomass. ESF scientists have developed methods to propose higher energy returns than what we get when compared to a fossil fuel energy life cycle cost. There is strong evidence, however, that though biomass technology has its own unique limitations just as fossil fuels do, it promises more value to New Yorkers. It promises us a better value in jobs, in health, in a cleaner environment, and in a greener economy. It promises more adaptable infrastructure capable of merging with the existing grid without the enormous upfront investments required to expand natural gas infrastructure. Wind power likewise offers New York the opportunity to address many ongoing energy issues. We need to double and better yet triple investments in renewable wind energy over the next 5 years. Offshore wind offers especially attractive aspects for New York City. By investing in the ability to harness the power of offshore wind, New York City could circumvent the electrical transmission bottleneck that exists in getting power to Long Island. The installation of offshore wind at suitable sites in New York City could reduce energy prices in the city and even across the state as demand for energy upstate is reduced by installation of offshore energy downstate. Wind turbines last for 20 to 30 years, gas pipelines last longer, but absolutely commit us to an already overexploited and chaotic natural gas marketplace where costs are only likely to go up and fluctuate rapidly and wildly. Mid-American Energy just announced that the state of Iowa approved a groundbreaking in November on a 500 megawatt wind farm, the largest single site in Iowa history. It calls for 218 wind turbines spread out over 70,000 acres. Dubbed the Highland Wind Energy Project, it's part of a $1.9 billion expansion of Iowa's wind energy capacity. They plan to have the project completed by 2015, not 2050. The $1 billion Green Bank and 2050 carbon reduction target that is in the updated or the draft New York Energy Plan is frankly, unfortunately, pitiful compared to Iowa's investment in infrastructure alone. I think that if Iowa can do it, we can definitely do it. We have no excuses left. It might be a challenge to put a stock price on wind resources or shrub willow, at least at first. But the dividends paid back to New York through investments in a low-carbon green economy and an updated energy grid are real, and they are waiting for us if only we reach out to seize the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Azar, did you leave your comments? Oh, thank you very much. Rafonway Flynn, to be followed by Renee Fogelsang.
Thank you for your time. I used to be one of those folks that wanted to go to meetings. I wanted to go to public meetings. I graduated with an urban planning degree, and I went out into the world, and I got my $100,000 ICE-T grant for bicycle and intermodal transportation, and it was funneled improperly. And I could never sign my name again on another grant from the federal government. For me personally, I wouldn't do it because my grandfather set the tracks for honesty and business. He was the senior agricultural economic advisor to the White House. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for myself. I'm embarrassed for what's happened. I've worked in the mergers and acquisition. I'm not going to reiterate what everyone said. Fact is these guys have billions of dollars to waste. And you know what? We've got a moratorium and we're fleecing them. We are fleecing these companies because we're not. I don't see it happening. How could, with all this, how could we not be fleecing these companies? Sure, we'll maybe do it. We'll maybe do it. Oil and gas says we'll win. You got one propane guy saying, our impoverished people with propane only need it now. Freezing cold, trailer parks. And I'm embarrassed to say I've done the research. That's a majority that has not been heard. I don't know. I mean, I bowed out of this. I tried to bow out of it gracefully. And the next thing you know, I was surrounded by a SWAT team and called an eco-terrorist. So, you know, I gotta lay low. But I'll tell you, my experience in the mergers and acquisitions from 2008 and onward, I know what it's like to have Chesapeake Bay come up here and say, we are going to quadrant off this area, get these leases signed, lie to these people, and do it. And we're getting $5,000 commission a lease to do it. So amen to the one with 115 acres saying no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Renee Fogelsang, followed by Carol Chalk.
Hello. So I have a couple different statements to read. I hope to get that in 5 minutes. My name is Renee Vogelsang. I'm a community organizer with New Yorkers Against Fracking and Frack Action. New Yorkers Against Fracking, as you probably know, a coalition of over 200 organizations across the state. I actually am from the Syracuse, New York region, and I currently live here in Syracuse, New York. First, I'm going to read a statement from Jean Kessler, counselor at large here in Syracuse, New York. Unfortunately, she couldn't get here because she couldn't find a parking spot. She has trouble walking up here, and she's on her lunch break. And so she was extremely dismayed that she couldn't make it up here, and I'd like to reiterate the comments of others that the accessibility of this location was extremely poor, the parking was extremely poor, and as community organizers, we host events that have parking lots right next to our events, handicap accessibility, and so on, so that people can come and participate. So just wanted to preface it with that. But her statement goes as follows, and she's, and I could just say in her statement who she's speaking on behalf of, but it reads, I'm Jean Kessner, counselor at large for the city of Syracuse. I'm here today speaking on behalf of elected officials to protect New York. EOPNY, a consortium of more than 800 locally elected officials from every county in New York State, who are united in advocating to continue the moratorium on fracking until and unless health studies prove that fracking will not be harmful to human or environmental health. EOPNY will file a longer statement separately to further EOPNY's view of the state energy plan. In a word, we find lacking. While setting forth an admirable goal of 80% reduction in greenhouse gases from 1990 levels by 2050, the plan lacks a strong roadmap for how we get there. It sets no benchmarks or clear steps. Inexplicably, the plan forecasts only anemic growth in renewable energy sources and instead promotes the widespread expansion of natural gas. It actually describes natural gas as a quote-unquote clean fuel. Natural gas is a fossil fuel. Burning it contributes to climate change. Clean fuels are renewable like wind, hydro, and solar. According to this plan's own documentation, New York State more than doubled power generation from wind and solar between 1990 and 2012. That is a far bigger gain than from any other power source. Although there are some good initiatives in the plan relating to renewables, we need more specific and more significant commitments to expanding the role for renewable. Contrary to this, unfortunately, the plan predicts that natural gas production in New York State will triple by 2030, intimating that New York's moratorium on fracking will be lifted. It indicates that production may well be even greater in the state if permitting difficulties, quote unquote, are reduced. Further, the plan promotes increased infrastructure for gas transmission and distribution, a misguided use of our state's resources and investments. Fracking is not clean. A significant and rapidly growing body of science shows that fracking poisons water, air, land, and contributes to climate change. It releases methane, a potent greenhouse gas, which brings me to my next point. Just what are our goals here? Again, the plan reaffirms New York's goals of reducing total greenhouse gas emissions 80% from 1990 levels by 2050. Yet this plan only commits to measuring one greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, before 2030. This ignores methane, which is 34 times more potent a greenhouse gas over 100 years and 86 times more so over 20 years. Significant amounts of methane are leaked during the gas drilling and fracking process in transporting natural gas. New York needs a plan that charts a course for the future, that sets aggressive targets for production of renewable energy and for greater energy efficiencies economy-wide. A plan that tightens building codes and ups standards on appliances and aggressively enforces the rules. We need to set our sights high and lead the nation away from its dependence on fossil fuels. This will set us on a brighter and healthier path for the future, and it will create more jobs and continued reliance on dirty fossil fuels. And that's Jean Kessner on behalf of elected officials to protect New York. Once again, over 800 elected officials across the state.
Sorry.
Yes. Jean Kessner, counselor at large for this year. Geankessner.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, did I say G? Sorry, Gean. I apologize. Oh, J.
G, it's a J.
My brain is thinking J and saying G. I apologize. It's been a long. So I do want to just briefly read my own personal statements. I hope that that's allowed. I know, I'm reading for two different people here. Sure. Yeah. So I'm trying to get in my time frame. Sorry about that.
It's probably, we understand.
Okay. Thanks. So once again, my name's Renee Vogelsang. I work with New Yorkers Against Fracking and Frack Action. I'm from Camillus, New York, and live in Syracuse, New York. I don't want to reiterate too much. You know, we're against gas infrastructure build out in New York. We're against gas production in New York, importation of gas into New York due to the effects of methane on our climate. And, you know, we want the governor to take bold steps in renewable energy. But what I really want to say right now is that natural gas is a transition fuel mantra that has been manufactured by the gas industry, who has a monetary relationship with the president's administration and the mainstream media. We can't afford to look away at the facts and the science and the personal stories of people suffering from natural gas extraction and transportation across the country. Those who work at the heads of the gas industry are only thinking about their bottom line and either don't care what the consequences are being misled, or are in total denial. As leaders, we're calling on you to do your job and lead. Something my colleague Julia Walsh, who's here, has said and lived through her work is that it takes a village to raise a nation. And that's exactly where we are in New York State. It's going to take New York State to raise this entire nation. I understand that we need the political will for renewable energy, and I'll tell you today that we are working on it. But we need you to meet us halfway. We can't do it without you, just as you can't do it without us. And finally, I'd like to say that we need passion and heart for human life and planetary survival back in our government and in our community leaders. I'm calling on every young person, passionate person, female persons, all other persons who actually care about our survival to run for office and other leadership positions, because if this planning board, if this administration is not willing to do the right thing, then we're going to do the right thing.
Carol Chalk, to be followed by Thomas Starkey, I hope. Okay.
Hi, I'm Carol Chalk. I'm a legislator from Tompkins County, where I represent 7,530 constituents in District 3, primarily long-term residential areas adjacent to the Cornell University campus. I chair the Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, where we are actively involved in multiple projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our county, encourage solar production, and build energy-efficient housing. I am former chair of the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, where we built LEED equivalent facilities, installed solar arrays at our airport, and instituted energy-efficient controls in county buildings. I'm also vice chair of our Economic Development Committee, where we've looked at economic impacts of energy decisions. Thursday night, the Tompkins County Legislature, and I'll give you copies, passed this resolution providing comments and recommending important revisions to the 2014 draft New York State Energy Plan. It came out of the bipartisan committee unanimously. 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats, passed the legislature 10-4, with the only difference of opinion on our legislature as to the percentage by which methane, CH4, is responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change compared to carbon, CO2. 4 of us think that there's some hope for gas as a bridge fuel, and 10 of us think that more current research shows that it's really, if you look at the life cycle, no better than carbon. So we were unanimous in most of what we passed. We agree, all of us, that we will not be able to achieve our own or New York State targets in greenhouse gas reductions on the current course. We were unanimous that New York State must get serious about finding another path. Points of agreement: 80 by 50 target, 80% by 2050 as a target is a good idea. We're glad that New York State will finally put the draft targets into action. All carbon equivalents must count. We must rein in methane and other noxious emissions as well as carbon. That's in our resolution. Please see the recent research from Cornell University and other places, Jacobson, Jackson Morris, who wrote about, who's here, who wrote about New York Renewable Portfolio Standard. All of that is cited in our resolution. There must be defined interim targets. Our resolution points out that New York State requires us, when we apply for grants, to establish interim achievable targets when we receive grant funds. For example, for New York State's own Cleaner, Greener Communities Plan, but didn't include such targets for itself. The named plan for this draft document, and I will say this, it doesn't say this in the resolution, it's pretty much a misnomer. We say it more politely in the resolution. While it establishes some admirable goals and makes some predictions based upon a continuation of business as it has been, it is not a plan in the modern sense of the word, in which future direction is set and alternative predictions are made that would depend upon implementation of the new set of initiatives. Our resolution calls for a final plan that would be worthy of that name. Let me stop for a minute and reflect on who we are. Tompkins County is not alone in deciding that energy policy is worthy of our time. Electeds at all levels in our municipalities and in other counties across New York State are looking at not only fracking, but wider energy decisions. Tompkins County Council of Governments has a Sustainable Energy Task Force. There's now an elected officials network consisting of some 800 elected officials at all levels throughout the state. 200 municipalities have rewritten land use controls thinking about energy use, and thousands more are looking at that. Energy decisions affect not only our environment, but our economics. Bipartisan electeds are studying policy, instituting clean energy programs on local levels and emissions targets, concluding that fossil fuels, including natural gas infrastructure, are not good for our economy. The numbers don't work. Damage from extreme storms cost us in Tompkins County over $500,000 this year, and if you count the recent salt and storms, I think we're probably getting closer to $1 million. Property tax income doesn't cover increased costs for public safety, for some of the things that we're talking about. Services, it doesn't cover costs for additional services or for public health, ensuring public health in our communities. We face uncertainty in pricing and energy mix. We just encourage you to read our resolution and create a final plan in the spirit in which planning has been taken as a tradition in this great state of New York. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have copies for all of you.
Thank you. Thomas Starkey, followed by Jackson Morris. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Starkey.
Good afternoon and thank you. My name is Drew Starkey and I'm a junior here at ESF. I believe that New York State Draft State Energy Plan has the potential to be a great doctrine that could put the state on the right track to lead the country in energy development. Two of the underlying motifs of this plan demand a cleaner environment as well as improved energy and affordability for New Yorkers. These two aspects can easily conflict, making it hard to determine an appropriate middle ground for that everyone will agree upon, especially when it comes to the upcoming role of natural gas. According to the EPA, quote, pound for pound, the comparative impact of methane on climate change is over 20 times greater than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period, end quote. If we reduce carbon emissions but increase the concentration of atmospheric methane, we will be back to square one. The fastest way to increase natural gas consumption for New Yorkers would be through hydrofracking. The long-term negative environmental consequences of hydrofracking far outweigh the short-term economic advancements. 30% of methane emissions come from natural gas and petroleum systems. Property values are decreased as a result of this harmful process. Even air and water quality are greatly reduced after fracking. Look at Onondaga Lake. That's a federally funded toxic waste Superfund site. New York has so much clean water available, we don't want to have to be going through the same processes of cleaning up our mistakes from the past in the future. These emissions and pollution will only create future problems similar to the ones we're combating right now. If hydrofracking is allowed in the state, we will be confronting the same environmental issues we have today further down the road. Please make the right decision and ban hydrofracking. Thank you.
Jackson Morris, followed by Kim Mitchell.
So I'm showing my age that I'm not reading this off my phone, but this is recycled paper. Good afternoon. My name is Jackson Morris. I'm Senior Energy and Climate Analyst at the Natural Resources Defense Council, an international nonprofit environmental organization with our headquarters here in New York State. NRDC has more than 1.4 million members and online activists, including more than 110,000 in New York State. Since our founding in New York in 1970, our lawyers, scientists, and environmental specialists have worked to protect the world's natural resources, public health, and the environment. NRDC's top institutional priority is curbing global warming emissions and building the clean energy future. For 2 decades, NRDC has worked to scale up renewable energy and energy efficiency in New York State as the key strategy for fighting global warming, protecting public health, lowering New Yorkers' energy bills, and creating jobs. As the result of efforts by many stakeholders and policies adopted by the state, New York has scaled up its clean energy efforts considerably. A decade ago, New York State had just 48 megawatts of wind power. Today, after a decade of our successful Renewable Portfolio Standard program, we have 1.8 gigawatts of wind, more than 37 times more than we had, with some of the largest projects located right here in central New York. Just 4 years ago, New York State had minimal amounts of solar power installed. Today, after the first phase of the New York Sun programs, not counting the many installations that occurred in 2013, we have nearly 200 megawatts and are finally in the top 10 states for installed solar. And yet we have far to go before we realize our full potential for clean energy in New York State. And in the aftermath of Hurricanes Irene and Lee and Superstorm Sandy, we understand more clearly than ever how high the stakes are in the struggle to move away from fossil fuels to clean energy. So the conversations that we are having through the State Energy Plan process are crucially important, as will be the policies that New York State adopts moving forward. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the 2014 draft New York State Energy Plan today. My testimony is broken into 4 parts. But at the outset, we'd like to thank NYSERDA for their efforts to produce a solid draft plan that synthesizes a lot of useful information about New York's current and projected energy mix and includes some thoughtful recommendations. However, moving forward, we urge New York State to include more explicit commitments to specific clean energy goals and policies. These will be needed to meet our emissions reductions, clean energy, environmental, and public health goals. In particular, we strongly urge that the final plan include a 2030 modeling run that captures the vast energy efficiency and renewable energy potential the draft itself references, a full 43% of electric demand from efficiency, and comparable numbers for renewables. Doing so results in a starkly different energy mix than currently projected. 1, the draft plan includes a laudable long-term emissions target of 80% reductions in greenhouse gases by 2050, but needs more interim goals, mile markers to ensure we get there. New York should establish near and midterm targets for 2018 and 2021 to help achieve the year-over-year economy-wide greenhouse gas reductions to meet Governor Cuomo's long-term goals. For example, a 2018 target of a 14% reduction from 2011 levels and a 20% by 2021 would ensure the state is on the appropriate glide path to meet our 80 by 50 goal. In addition, targets should be based on the actual carbon dioxide equivalent reductions, not carbon intensity, as stated on page 28 of the plan. Instead, goals must be set in terms of actual tonnage reductions of CO2 equivalent to provide an accurate measurement of policy performance. And carbon should be clarified to refer to CO2 equivalent. Other greenhouse gases, such as methane, are significantly more potent than carbon from a climate forcing perspective over shorter time periods. And the prevailing science has illustrated that a comprehensive approach to greenhouse gas reductions is necessary to mitigate climate change. Thus, we recommend that the final plan incorporate that change in order to ensure adequate attention is paid to mitigating those high-impact greenhouse gases in addition to carbon. 2, extending and expanding programs for clean renewable energy and energy efficiency will play a central role in meeting these ambitious but achievable greenhouse gas reductions. Energy efficiency. The draft plan includes a state commitment through 2020 to energy efficiency programs, which are currently set to expire in 2015. While this time horizon is essential to ensuring certainty for utilities, building owners, and contractors to invest in efficiency, this commitment must be coupled with targets and dollar budgets to capture all cost-effective efficiency. Based on historical performance and various analyses, a goal of meeting roughly 20% of the forecasted demand in 2025 through energy efficiency, along with comparable programs for targeting end-use natural gas efficiency, seems appropriate. Programs should also be designed to target sectors such as affordable multifamily housing that have traditionally been underserved and represent a vast reservoir of cost-effective efficiency. Wrap it up.
No, speak more
slow down.
slowly, I think.
Okay, sorry.
That's the trade-off, thanks.
Got it, okay. A sector in which the value proposition for energy savings is heightened, as low-income families can spend up to 20% of their income on energy, compared with only 4% for the average household. Building codes and state appliance efficiency standards must be updated more regularly as well as aggressively enforced. For too long, this area has suffered from a lack of funding and political will to follow through on stated commitments. As buildings account for the lion's share of energy demand in the state, 72% of primary energy in 2012, strengthening codes and standards will spur economic growth by reducing overall energy expenditures, create jobs, and reduce emissions. The final plan must build on the draft's mention of codes and standards by including more specific action items and metrics to ensure the state follows through on the commitment. Specifically, the Codes Council process for adopting the 2012 IECC ASHRAE 90.1-2010 for both residential and commercial buildings has slipped repeatedly and should be a top priority for the administration. We also urge full participation by the state in the IECC model code setting process. Renewable energy. The final plan must scale up renewable energy. As with efficiency, the draft plan includes a state commitment through 2025 to a renewable energy portfolio. With this, I'll hurry up. While this is positive, the final plan should direct the PSC to issue an order by year-end 2014 that targets meeting half of the state's electricity demand with renewable energy in 2025. Further, many customers who pay into the RPS are unable to site solar, wind, or other renewables where they live or work due to infrastructure constraints. To address this barrier, the final plan should include a directive to pursue the regulatory and/or legislative changes necessary to allow customers to aggregate their demand and subscribe to off-site renewable projects. Such policies are already being implemented in states such as Colorado. Fracking. NRDC is pleased that the state energy plan appears not to contemplate new high-volume hydraulic fracturing within New York State. NRDC remains opposed to any new fracking in New York until the potential risks to human health and the environment have been fully evaluated. Given that important new science continues to be advanced, particularly with respect to potential health impacts, we support the ongoing de facto moratorium on fracking in the state. In the meantime, we are aware that the state's continued and projected increase in consumption of natural gas from other locations results in serious impacts in those places. Although NRDC and others continue to work to ensure that the most protective safeguards are put in place wherever fracking is occurring, our top priority must be to move beyond fossil fuels as rapidly as possible. Consistent with the other recommendations made in this testimony, NRDC therefore urges the state to take aggressive measures to reduce our dependence on all fossil fuels and to ramp up the use of efficiency and renewables as quickly as possible. 30 seconds, sorry. New York should pursue aggressive transportation sector greenhouse gas emissions. In 2012, the transportation sector accounted for 28% of New York's primary energy use, and has persistently been the fastest growing sector year over year. New York should build on its Charge New York initiative to continue investing in electric vehicle infrastructure, make the necessary regulatory changes at the PSC to remove barriers to EVs and create incentives and education programs to accelerate EV adoption. And the governor must also ensure New York plays a lead role in fulfilling the recently signed 8-state zero-emissions vehicle MOU and explore mechanisms that can track the carbon intensity of the state's liquid fuels, which are on a path to get dirtier as tar sands-derived fuels potentially enter the state's market. There should also be additional goals and implementation details about the proposed initiatives on increasing transportation system and location efficiency and coordinated infrastructure investment through integrated energy transportation, land use, and sustainability planning, all of which yield reductions in emissions, reduced transportation costs, greater economic growth, and a higher quality of life for New York's residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Morris, could you drop off a copy? Thank you. Mr. Morris. Kim Mitchells or Michaels?
Hi, my name is Kim Michaels.
And just quickly, so the following person will be Tamara Cook. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
I'm naming the person who will follow you. So he
Oh,
or she
pardon
can-
me.
Thank you, sorry.
Actually, I've heard a lot of the comments today, and it seems that people are seeing this as either natural gas or clean, green, renewable energies. My issue with this whole deal is that they both come out of the same hole, and they both involve nuclear energy and radiation, as found in our shales. Our shale contains natural gas, shale oil, high concentrations of rare earths, which are used for the clean renewable energies, so-called clean renewable energies, of which China has suffered horrendous health and environmental degradation. They have cancer villages, issues with skyrocketing birth defects. This has been, there's been a huge attempt on the part of China in keeping this covered up. And one particular story that I had heard about was Jerry Yang of Yahoo, who had assisted the Chinese government in jailing journalists from China who were pro-democracy journalists, and by providing them with private email information, he ended up getting nailed for it. But he was, I believe he settled out of court. Some of these people ended up with 10-year jail sentences. That's just one thing I wanted to mention, but I'm asking all of you, if you hold the United States up to the same standards as we have held other countries, this would require that you put on hold not only this energy plan, but Cuomo's entire budget, recent amendments, and recent changes as far as laws that he's put into effect, because all of it, not even just so much of it, all of it pertains to this mining issue. In mining for, in mining for the rare earths, they also, in addition to the fact that they're totally interlinked with radioactive material, and they have to be separated from each other, they use intense heat, extremely toxic acids, and in addition, more recently, they have begun creating genetically engineered microorganisms. These microorganisms have to be created to withstand intense extremes in heat, temperature, radiation, toxic heavy metals, toxic gases, all the things that we would typically use to destroy a harmful bacteria. The magnitude of this, I can't even describe, because if something like this got out into the environment, and I fear that it may already have, it would be uncontrollable. You just sit there and picture an ordinary invasive species of a plant or an animal that you can actually see, and think of how difficult it is to eradicate something like that. In this situation, you're dealing with something that is so small you can't even see it. Some of them it's difficult to see even with a microscope. And these bacteria, it's bacteria, yeasts, mold, fungi, all of which have the ability to reproduce rapidly, to evolve rapidly, and also to transfer their genetic material to other microorganisms. They can destroy existing microorganisms in our environment, and they can also just overtake it. The human body has more more microbes than cells. They play a major role in every form of life. Just to give you some idea of the issue that we're dealing with. Now I'll go on with what I had actually already planned. There are great men in our history who feared for America's future, all of them due to radiation and nuclear power. Between them, the additional grave concern due to corruption and unethical alliances between government, justice, business, and academia. Those men are Albert Einstein, a known pacifist, considered the greatest genius of all time, Dr. Carl Z. Morgan, known as the father of nuclear health physics, and Admiral Hyman Rickover, considered the father of the nuclear navy. It is my concern that our governor and president, with the help of others, have effectively declared an unofficial war on their own people. A war involving economic, psychological, biological, chemical, and radioactive warfare, and a slide into fascism. The same is happening in a number of other countries simultaneously in what appears to be a conspiracy to create a world government which would effectively enslave rather than represent the masses. Like a game of I'll let you in to exploit my people, and you let us into your country to exploit your people. Once in, good luck getting them out, for the people of any country. Foreign ownership of our resources, grid, major businesses, and debt, and vice versa. Environmental health devastation would be permanently unfixable, though the same resources and technologies used to create the damage would also be used to mitigate it by the same group of international businessmen with political clout. It is for this reason that I ask that Cuomo's proposed budget and energy plan in its entirety, and all recent changes to law and expenditures other than those needed to provide for the running of our government and necessary public programs, be rejected, or at least put on hold while my claims are investigated. Such a request may seem extraordinary, but due to the potentially catastrophic consequences of allowing such expenditures, changes, and implementation of recently approved amendments to continue, upholding this request is not only reasonable but imperative if the people in our state and our country, as well as the people of other countries, are to be protected from a group of treasonous international business families with political strength but dangerously lacking in morality and compassion. This group poses a threat of unprecedented proportion due to the involvement of unprecedented massive mining, release, and use of highly radioactive and toxic materials as found in the shales, the mass propagation, use, and release of invincible genetically engineered microorganisms, and the ability to alter and engineer climate and geological events.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I've given you some latitude on the time. If it's written comments, could you submit them in your...
Actually, the person before me spoke for quite a bit longer, I believe. Well, the last thing I would like to say is that the people that I would ask that the investigation include Governor Cuomo, President Obama, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and as pertains to him, the NRDC, and his association with Vantage Point Venture Partners, now known as Vantage Point Capital Partners, and their support of, actually their involvement with Bright Source Energy and Air Products, James C. Kennedy, Al Gore, and Major General Charles R. Henry, who seems to be the one who benefited most from the recent amendments. His involvement with the National Ventures Business Development Corporation definitely deserves some attention. I think it's unfortunate that you don't want to hear the rest. I mean, if you truly want to make a good decision.
We have several speakers who are waiting to speak. The rules that we set out at the beginning.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Please come back at the end of the queue. Thank you.